not constructive. We all know that. I mean, we're not saying that, but by the way, I got to convince 4 council members in my community who are against funding one of our agencies. The same in the next city. And by the way, 4 of the cities are all in the same boat. So we got to do a lot of our own heavy lifting to get us to a point of a consensus, but still with a vision that we're doing the right thing and just not throwing money around because everybody deserves that. Agencies gave up, as a whole, our 19 cities gave up a lot, $1.3 billion to East County because of a horrendous, horrible problem. With all due respect, those people that lived there didn't create the problem, right? It wasn't the appropriate planning and the infrastructure links and all of that land use. It didn't work. So what can we do going forward? We're a transportation agency, the only one in the state of California that has a growth management element. We ought to be proud of that. And we ought to find a way to think about, and I said this last time, that our performance standards, I think, are really important on individual projects and categories, recognizing regional equity because it won't go through without that, but also recognizing that if those standards we were just talking about are really clear and straightforward. We have an AB 32, SB 375 requirement. We need to make sure we don't violate that we're honoring that, each of our communities. On the specifics of the each one of those categories, the wording in there, there's some serious issues in them that need to be changed. And you can see letters that are starting to come in for each of our jurisdictions says, you can't do this. The housing, trying to tie these dollars into building more affordable housing. None of us build housing. Let's be clear. None of us build housing. We each have general plans. We each have HCD compliance. Every single one of us. Some of us have general plans that are in place and will be there till 2030, and some are a little longer than that. We can't change those. Those are some are voter approved. So we have to balance all of that. So we can't come back with a transportation plan that has strings attached to it that prevents us of completing the master plan vision. And I don't want to change personally, and I don't think any city wants to sit here and tell the county, you have to do something. That's not how we got into growth management. And let's remember, it was a county urban limit line, right? Give the county credit. We all support it. The fact is, it was a county urban limit line that started. We need to honor that. And I know there's a lot of fear of these changes. They keep pointing to Bob about this. But bottom line is this is a master plan. Let's keep our eye on the ball. We need to compromise. We need to listen to everybody. And I think people have been fairly reasonable to date.
Thank you. So I want to be polite to all my fellow commissioners. We can impose a 2-minute rule on our speakers. We could also impose a 2-minute rule on ourselves. Commissioner Durant.
That's fine.
So, all right. So I'm going to agree with everything that Commissioner Arnott just said. I think that was a right, rational, and even-handed way to say it. I think it's also important that we recognize that all of us are here because we believe firmly in a regional approach to trying to manage ourselves out of the challenges that we face. But I'm not in favor of a regional approach that sacrifices local control. And so I think just as I'm not in favor of state approaches that impinge on our county control, and I'm not in favor of federal approaches that encroach on our state and county control. So I think there's a real balance to be struck there, and it does feel occasionally like we wander too far from that. So I'd encourage us to not wander that far. The second sort of broader overarching point with respect to the funding categories is I think it's far more important to incentivize the behavior that we want and the management, whether it's of growth or something else that we want, than to sort of penalize and disadvantage. And the way that we structure things in terms of equity, I think, really still requires us to value the differences in the subregions and the differences between our cities, and continue to recognize that one size doesn't fit all, and frankly, 5 sizes don't fit all, because there's 19 cities plus the county, each of which wants to have its own personality, its own flavor, its own solutions to the unique problems that each serve, lest we go the way of looking and feeling and so on, too much like, say, L.A. County. With all respect to my friends to the Deep South. But so I think those 2 things for me are the most important components of getting past sort of these things and working our way down into solutions.
Yes, I'm glad to follow on with the Commissioner, because I agree with much of what he said. I think this plan fails to recognize the vast differences in different parts of the counties. I had a 72 operator come here today to talk to you about standing loads with 10-minute headways. And we put the 72R in on the weekends, drop the headways down to 7.5 minutes, and we still have occasional standing loads. My guess is that's not true anywhere else in the county. And that's never going to be handled by autonomous vehicles. Our planning staff estimated that to carry the capacity that the 72 carries would take 800 vehicles driving up and down San Pablo. So I think you need to recognize that, and need to recognize that particularly in West County, there's definitely a need for expanded bus transportation. I don't think WICTAC went far enough, but they went further than the countywide plan, and I think that's reasonable given the difference in land use and population density and population demographics in the different parts of the county.
Thank you, Commissioner Hudson.
Yeah, maybe this is a different take. I'm kind of going around it. I think the new measure transportation expenditure plan 1.2-9 really is very close. I think it's ready to go to the RTPCs, ready to even try and get some comments after the RTPCs to the cities. I think we're a lot closer than what I'm hearing here. And let me give you an example. If I talked to Dave, too, he had to listen to me ramble, so I'll try and keep this, Dave Campbell, so I can keep this under 2 minutes. They're asking for 5% in the pedestrian, bicycle, and trail facility, so roughly you move from 60 million to 100 million. SWAT is 19%. And SWAT is putting in 24.7 million. I mean, we're already doing what they're asking for. And the reality is, as I pointed out, we'll pull a lot more from the 120 million local street maintenance and improvements to combine with that when we start coming up with the best projects. You have to look at each cost benefit. The other thing is, I think really as we get into this, we need to take a look at what these alternative scenarios are coming from MTC and ABAG. Because I don't want to give away any funding if it's potentially there. We don't know which scenario it is, but we should get involved with it. Last, we heard a lot about 239 and the Tri-Link. I think that is an extremely important part of this plan. You heard people talk about truck traffic that was going through Byron. That is a minor part of the traffic that is going to East County. If you really want to see how bad it is, drive back from L.A. about 4 in the morning and go past Wesley, and you'll swear it's the largest city in Contra Costa County, in San Joaquin. It's nothing but trucks. And that is repeated several times in different areas as they come into the Bay Area, all on 580. You could sit at BART and count 15 trucks, 1 car, 15 more trucks. It's just over and over again. And then at 680, head north. The other thing that wasn't mentioned is they don't want growth inducing. Our environmentalists, I agree with you, but you're not going to stop Mountain House. That's another Doherty Valley that's going out in San Joaquin County, plus others that are close by that will be built up over the next 20 years. And there is a reverse commute out of Antioch that I didn't realize until I heard it from Don Freitas of about 10,000 people. And we're trying to get them to the lab, to Pleasanton, to San Ramon. This is a huge number of people on Vasco Road, which isn't exactly the safest road around. So what we're looking at is this is not just an East County problem. I know that the business park in my city tried to get buses to commute to Bishop Ranch, and we got turned down from the Air District because we didn't meet the cost-benefit analysis, et cetera. But I hope they go back into it, because East County's not going to shrink, and San Ramon's not going to shrink, and the business park isn't going to shrink. And all you have to do is look at 580, and you'll know that there are a lot of problems out there that we're working on that aren't just Contra Costa.
So Commissioner Butt.
Well, you know, I know we're going to have to do it, but in terms of building 239 and all of these other road projects, you know, after all the money we've spent from Measure J and the measure before it, people tell me what road, what freeway has gotten better. None. They've all gotten worse. You know, I heard one gentleman say, everyone is drowning in traffic. I mean, that's what happens, and you can't build your way out of it. You know, any improvement you make is temporary. Every time you build a new road or add a lane to a freeway, all you're doing is inducing growth and making it worse in the end. And so I realize we're going to have to do it. You know, if we're going to have to allocate funds to build 239 to get the votes to do this thing, we got to do it. But I'll bet you if it happens 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it's just going to be worse. It's not going to get better. You know, this building roads is not the solution to our transportation problems. It just makes it worse, not better.
Okay, Commissioner Romick and I'd like to end the discussion on this item.
Growth is coming whether we build roads or not. As I've stated a number of times here, the majority of affordable housing, market rate affordable housing, is being built in East County, for if not just Contra Costa, most of the Bay Area. So people are looking for some place to live as we grow as a community, as we continue to grow population-wise. Infill is happening in East County. We can't ignore or take away options for transportation in East County. If we want to expand our economic vision and ability, we need to be able to grow. We need to be able to handle the traffic that we have today and tomorrow, and ignoring it isn't going to be the solution. And I'll end it there so we don't ramble much.
Well, thank you. So this is going to come back to us for continued discussion next week. To the extent that you have conversations with people in your region or other people around the county, and I'm sure everyone will, what I'd encourage everyone to do is to remember the variety of things we have heard tonight, because success only comes if we collectively find a way to put this on the ballot and get 2/3 approval. So, you know, we can't follow any given line of solution here and win. We still need some work to figure out where the middle ground is, and the people at this table are capable of figuring that out. But with that, why don't we go to the urban limit line?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would respectfully request that that be put over till next week. We only have 20 minutes, and I just
Okay.
don't think it's going to get done. And, you know, I thought maybe we should go to the next item, but we do have a meeting. I heard earlier that we may have a fourth meeting. I want to give it the time and the attention. We may get it done in 20, but we've guaranteed to all of us that we'd be out of here by 9 o'clock, and I just don't see that happening.
Okay. It's the will of the committee.
But just a question, and maybe we don't talk about it, but I believe that you, the supervisors, had a meeting on this. Could you at least share that? So that just in a objective, broad view, set the table so when we come back, we'll all have the same thought process.
Be happy
that
to
would
do
be
so,
okay.
and my
Chair.
colleague also. We did have a meeting yesterday just to go over what some of the concerns that have been raised by members of EPAC. The board is very clear We do not feel there needs to be any change to the urban limit line. There's been no sprawl. There's been no abuse of it. We're still open to conversations around consistency relative to the variety of cities in the county having perhaps different language and or issues on acreage. We're open to the idea of no contiguous, hopscotch kind of thing, so that there's clarity and people feel assured there will be no abuse. But at this point, I think it's fair to say our entire board is very committed that we feel that the current urban limit line situation of 30 acres or less has not had a problem. We're all elected officials as our city counterparts, and that's what the public process is for. So Supervisor Pifo was here earlier. I don't wish to speak for her, but she made some very strong comments about how she will not support the TEP and this plan if there is I'm saying, and Ms. Vanderbrook Riley is here. I want to make sure I'm correctly quoting Supervisor Pifo, that, and I think the rest of us, but we're not going to go out there yet, but she won't support a TEP that has any changes other than those that retain local control. And we feel that we're in the middle of the 10-year review. That won't be completed until later this year. And we all go through those land use planning processes, and we feel that that is the appropriate place to handle urban limit line issues.
And if I could just summarize the staff report in less than a minute. If you look at page 1.4-3 and 4, it provides the data on how different jurisdictions currently work to amend their respective urban limit line. In summary, it says as 20 jurisdictions, we're all over the map. We don't have quite 20 different solutions, but we're close. And so that led to the recommendation that we at least make those consistent. And there are 3 components of that. One is that you'd be able to make at least one of the findings that's in County Measure L, which is in attachment 1.5, it's really 1.4 that was handed out today. The second, that we have some consistent findings regarding what a non-consecutive resolution is, and that's included in a letter from the county to the board back, board to the authority back years ago, and also in Brentwood and Oakley's exhibits at the back of that. And finally, the county and San Ramon require a supermajority vote. And so the third component would be that all jurisdictions would have a supermajority vote before they use the 30-acre exemption. And then there are other categories that are listed for discussion purposes. There's no recommendation. We could do those, we could not do those.
Thank you. That's not very good.
All right, is there any interest in taking up item 1.5? Or shall we just give ourselves credit for ending early this evening?
Well, I
and
read
discuss
the
whether we
staff
want to have
report,
it?
and it was just going to be I don't mean just, it was going to be a staff report. It's for information only. There was no action. I think that we can do our homework.
Okay.
I did have a question.
Okay, well, let me go to Ross and then.
Well, yeah, I agree with Supervisor Mitchoff. The only comments to think about that really aren't in the staff report, one is these sections are not in Measure J. Sometimes they're buried in an ordinance, and we put it in here, and that's one of the decisions we'll have to make. Is it in the expenditure plan itself, just from a transparency point of view? And then some of the suggestions are beefed up from what's in Measure J. So that's really would have been the tone of the discussion. And some of the specific points, or some of the discussion happened yesterday at your meeting about governance structure, considering adding some rotation in there for the Board of Supervisors, really changing the Citizens Advisory Committee into an oversight committee with some teeth and some broader representation. So, yeah, it's all in the staff report, but those are really the kind of comments we're looking for. Ultimately, is in the TEP, do we want this additional accountability and transparency? And then the governing structure proposes some changes, and then there's some other changes that aren't in here that we'll likely hear about.
Through the
Commissioner
chair.
Arnerich and then Commissioner Taylor. Okay, Commissioner Taylor.
First of all, through the chair, I'd like to find out, if possible, you might have some speaker cards people did come, and yes, on that, and they might not be able to actually make it to the next meeting or whatever. Could we take the comments? Would that be appropriate?
I just had a quick comment. I just want us to keep in mind about, we come out with two measures. They coexist for a long time. I'm really concerned, this is sort of another layer. We have an oversight system put in place now. I don't want that to go away. I think it's worked well. To come up with a new one, find a way that we can deal with what those issues are. But if we create a different governance, these meetings, we'll be having two meetings. We'll have to have one set of rules and another, and then you're going to have two oversights because we have an oversight requirement in Measure J. So as much as we want to change and make it harder and tougher, and I understand some people doing that, let's really, think, what is the purpose of the oversight? Is there something we need to tweak in what we have now to make it respond better?
Yeah.
And if so, then maybe we ought to consider it for both, not just unilateral.
Just real quick, I think that most of the issues that's been identified are those are language or where that information is inconsistent. And so it's a cleanup effort, I think, more so than anything else, is to make sure that the language is very consistent and that the language is in all documents that's put out as it relates to the urban limit line. And therefore, I think you clean it up because in terms of whether we want to make any changes, it's worked. It hasn't been an issue. And those communities that have not wanted to live by the urban limit line rules, they went out and got voter approval for their own line. And that's still an opportunity for folks to do. So
far on items 1.4 and 1.5, Stephen Smith. And if you can come back next week, you can hold your comment until then.
Okay, on agenda item 1.4, I have watched the developments on this issue with great interest and more than a little trepidation. Having watched the amount of time invested in this TEP process by so many, my personal opinion is it would be tragic if lines were drawn in the sand were drawn that could not be bridged by compromise. I have a few points to make as a highly informed observer of the authority since 2006, including service on the Citizens Advisory Committee since 2009. First is the utter absurdity of any one-size-fits-all approach. I am a resident of Brentwood. My city has a very robust agricultural land preservation program and process. It does not have, nor does it need, a hillside preservation ordinance. I was for several years a resident of Orinda, where the exact opposite applies. There's a whole spectrum of needs among the various cities. The entire structure of this authority recognizes and is built on the varying needs of the various subregions in our county. I see a new case having been made that the 30-acre year rule has been abused. In my city, the urban limit line, when opposed, resulted in an absurd situation in western Brentwood, which continues to put hundreds of school children and their parents at serious risk every school day. If a small adjustment in the urban limit line in this area remains possible, we might be able to resolve this situation. I do believe that there's room for compromise in the areas of adding required findings, including reviewing the status of infill development, a limit on sequential applications of the 30-acre exemption, and several other items listed in the staff report. A final observation on the role of compromise in governance. When you adopt an all-or-nothing approach, you incur a substantial probability of receiving nothing. You want me to go on to my comments on 1.5? Or
if you do, go ahead.
okay, it'd be fairly quick, but it's a whole new topic. As I've mentioned before, I have been a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee since 2009 and have chaired the committee for the past 3 years. I agree that transitioning the Citizens Advisory Committee into a Citizens Oversight Committee with expanded responsibilities makes a good deal of sense. I have observed that the base workload of the Citizens Advisory Committee is very cyclic, mostly being tied to the review of growth management program checklists as they become available. It also appears to me that peak financial governance issues generally come to the fore at times when checklist review is at an ebb. Ever since the requirement to file Form 700 was imposed on CAC members, we have had difficulties in attracting and retaining members. I feel then and feel now that this was an overreach based on overly conservative legal reasoning. I strongly counsel that the charter of the Citizens Oversight Committee place it clearly outside the path of direct influence on the Authority Board's legislative powers, and that no Form 700 requirement be opposed. Indeed, I personally regard the imposition of a Form 700 requirement at odds with the very nature of a Citizens Oversight Committee, as it adds an unnecessary hurdle to citizen participation. Thank you.
So the other thing we have on our agenda is given how much progress we've made tonight, do we want to schedule a meeting during the third week of March?
I think we should.
That's what I warned about when we first talked about this. I have a rigorous travel schedule, and I built it around the fact that we have these meetings. Right. So that we have an alternate, and he'll have to show up if you're doing it that night. Let's see. I have a city council meeting on the Monday night, traveling Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Friday night is Good Friday.
Okay, I think that was enough. All right, so for the others of us, you'll still be back on for the 29th. So for the others, does the 23rd work? Hearing. So we already have the 16th. Now we're adding the 23rd, and we already have the 29th, which is a Tuesday, remember? Right, so we're adding one on the 16th. All right, so with that, thank you, everybody, and we're adjourned, and look for your packet, which will probably be out on Friday.